at its bare bones, it was an innovation of not having access to musical instruments, right? You don't have these musical instruments, so you grab available things. This is where we get the spoons. This is where we get the kind of jawbone, which were oftentimes put together with jug bands, right? These are people who don't have access to the tools of creativity saying, no, like my creativity will still shine. I'm going to use whatever.
Cool. My name's Allison Cross. I grew up in Murray, Kentucky. Moved to Louisville when I was 19, so a little bit of time split between the two cities. I came to Louisville to study music therapy, and I'm also a trombone player. I play a lot of instruments, but trombone is the thing that I came to college for. I have played on the boat in a swing band called Billy Goat Strut Review and a brass band called Hot Sauce Brass Band.
I'm Jared Zarantinello. I'm one half of Rhythm Science Sound. I'm a DJ and electronic and dance music producer. Performed on the Belle of Louisville and the Mary Miller, both as a DJ, and then doing some sound composition and sound engineering for some theater productions that have taken place on the boats. And then we've also collaborated with the boats in terms of tech development and kind of patron engagement. We worked with the Belle to design what we call the steamboat sound system, which is a kind of interactive music making tool that's on both of the boats for patrons to interact with and kind of have some fun making music.
I'm C's. I'm the other half of Rhythm Science Sound. So I'm a music producer and DJ, interdisciplinary artist. And then, just to echo what Jared said, we've worked on the Belle in a lot of capacities. For 2 years, we were part of their hometown music series. So we also facilitated kids cruises during the summers that not only were music performance based with us performing and DJing, but also giving space to interact with different music technologies, from biodata, which is their own bioelectricity or plant bioelectricity making music, to triggering calliope sounds, to also using MIDI technologies to play a lot of different kinds of compositions.
I think being a riverboat performer in 2025, it's such a wide range of people that come to the boat. And so I know for us as DJs, trying to think of how do we curate a 2-hour kind of exploration of music that fits most people's, what I'll say, needs, right? Needs for music. That's a real challenge when you have such a wide and diverse kind of spectrum of audience members. But we try to kind of read the crowd and present what is hopefully a real good kind of offering of music and culture through that music that can help people kind of share space together for this moment in time in the special place of the boat.
It's a really neat mix of music and time and place, and it bringing the past like straight to the present in such a memorable way for so many people. It's really neat.
Louisville is sometimes said to be kind of the birthplace of American popular music. I'm sure many people would disagree and put that birthplace elsewhere, but Louisville had such an important role in the birth of American pop music, really through its contribution to the early development of ragtime. Ragtime, for sure, we can point to ragtime and say this was the first kind of mass popular music in America. And this was the first music that started to be printed and published into physical media. So before there were even records, right, we had sheet music. And this is also, unfortunately, ragtime marks the start of this long American tradition of white appropriation of Black creativity. And we see that from the earliest days of ragtime. Ragtime was absolutely primarily a Black creative invention. The term itself, ragtime, means you can play any song, but you're ragging the time. It means you're adding this syncopated kind of polyrhythm to the interpretation of the piece to make it more danceable, to make it more rhythmic. It was also sometimes called Ethiopian time. So there we see this is clearly kind of an outgrowth of the font of Black creativity in the United States. But the first person who's credited as publishing a ragtime piece, Ben Harney, who is from right here in Louisville. I forget the name of the publishing house, but it was located here in Louisville. But this is widely considered the first piece of published ragtime music. Ben Harney was called kind of the father of ragtime. But as we know, right, this is all kind of a whitewashing of history. Ben Harney did work with, many, Black performing troops and sometimes amicably with them. But, the history kind of comes down in the power of institutionalized memory. And so when we're looking back at the history of ragtime and we look for who was publishing those first pieces, we see a lot of white faces and white names. But then we have to ask the question, who were the real originators of those styles? And those were mostly Black musicians traveling up and down the Ohio River, the Mississippi River, coming north from, New Orleans and bringing kind of Caribbean and Creole music systems that, again, were kind of translations of a lot of West African rhythmic systems. So, yeah, absolutely. Ragtime played a very important role in the kind of generation of American pop music and set like a big just template for how American pop music would function, for the next 100 plus years.
I went home about 4 o'clock, knocked on the door and found it locked. Down to the window and I took a peek. She's there fast asleep. Down along the bill line, all the best time, half past
9. Going back to what you first said, there are so many people that would negate Louisville being the home of pop music just because New Orleans exists. If you go to New Orleans, there's a place called Congo Square. And back in the day, the indigenous people would be there selling goods. And eventually that space became whitewashed. And we know what was happening out of New Orleans. Not only goods, but human cartel. And then, of course, the music that these people were playing on the boats, really hit every river city in the South. Your Nashvilles, your Cincinnati's, it definitely travels the river system. But I think a lot of people would separate out the Mississippi, Memphis style from the New Orleans and Louisville style. So depending upon where you're from in the United States, there's people in Kansas that'll be like, we're the home of pop music.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably people in Chicago, we were definitely the first ones. It's really, really interesting being part of that tradition because similar to storytelling, if the music or the stories are not being told right now in the present, then they're not happening. There's this whole canon of ancestral veneration of keeping their stories alive and keeping those traditions alive that comes with being a musician or a DJ or performer or theater person. It really takes a lot of intention to put those names back to where they belong, whether in location or with a person or circumstance.
I think Sylvester Weaver is just such a great example of someone who really took agency, right? He was a banjo player who then was absolutely not once the minstrelization started. And he transitioned his playing with other blues musicians to playing a very specific form of blues guitar. But, again, from the Smoketown neighborhood, literally not even 10 blocks from here is really kind of where his stomping grounds were and where he and Sara Martin and many others lived to do this work.
Yeah, and it was early musicians like these collaborators like King Oliver's band. It really wasn't until the first kind of Black focused record imprints kind of emerged with OK Records, who Sara Martin and Sylvester Weaver were both on, that was black media made for Black audiences. Yeah, when Sara Martin's records started coming out on OK record label, that's when these songs started to be shipped nationwide. And, it led to a national and international popularity that was rarely seen in the early 20s. Sara Martin performed all around the Caribbean, in Jamaica, in Cuba, Puerto Rico, performed in Europe. And these are sometimes for, maybe mixed audiences and vaudeville type venues. But a lot of these, especially if we're thinking about these performances in the Caribbean, right? This is part of a pan-diaspora kind of conversation happening in these new forms of dance music, these early forms of rhythm and blues, right? Which were translating those kind of spiritual vocal runs into these kind of danceable bangers, for lack of a better word, right? These were the first like dance hit bangers of the time.
My mama told me, and Papa told me too. You're mine, sweet baby, no matter what you do. And the boys all told me when I was 2 years old. Don't be no sour back, be a sweet loving old soul.
Those records, if you look at like Hound Dog, that song existed before it was recorded and then gets remixed through history and still appears today. I love when they take a track that was originally a blues track and then it became a rock and roll track and then it became a country track and then it became a like dance track and now it's a rap track. Like that is the same product being remixed. And like what if even a fraction of those records were attributed to the people that they actually came from? Like what a different soundscape we would have in popular music, like straight up and down.
And that's really, that's a big emphasis, right, of ours in terms of going back to that stewardship, right? Stewardship of story, stewardship of innovation. It's good that these songs are coming back and are reinterpreted. Again, that keeps them alive. But if that happens without a connection to the original innovators, that's where it can be really dangerous because you're severing connection to cultural legacy there. And then you're there enjoying, new creativity. But it's less in a way because it's without the richness of the entire story and community that came behind it. All the good and the bad, right? That's what makes richness. But so, I love to see, this kind of American pattern, and not only America, because we see it kind of with globalized pop music, but this kind of echo chamber, right, where these songs rebubble up after a time. But we just want that conversation to always be a little richer, a little deeper, and to always give kind of honor to the original innovators.
You see the same in classical music, actually. There have been Black classical performers and composers there the whole time. But when you fast forward to modern orchestras, like only a small fraction of orchestras are playing that music or hiring Black musicians or programming Black composers' pieces. Like it's just so stark. And what a tragedy, but also a huge opportunity for people to like look back and give life to the full breadth, the story of these songs and works and stories, etc. And creative pieces, Black creative pieces.
And like you said, and people and lives and communities.
Absolutely. Circumstances. Like it was not easy, and it's not just, it's not good just to take and not give back. I think there's always kind of been a circuit of people going from the Midwest up to New York to perform. And as far as I know, she was part of the Louisville Jug Band that was doing that circuit, going up there to perform, and was able to travel up there. Those are beginning roots, but she went on to be one of the highest paid performers, like Black lady, doing the circuit that mostly men are doing, writing songs, being published, having other names that she published under. Eventually was the highest paid performer. Like, huge deal, But if you look out in Louisville and like look for evidence of her being a native, like you just don't really see it.
Yeah, I would like there to be some kind of marker that they were here, that they existed, that they haven't been forgotten, right? That their roots are still being tended to. But I think, yeah, just other beautiful things about Sara. You know, she's attributed as being the first Black woman printed to a vinyl, to a wax record. Like, she's also one of the first performers to ever have a grill. So she performed globally, yeah, with a grill. So this idea of like adornment and self-pride and being like, ain't I'm clean, has existed for a long time. What I think is kind of most poignant about her is at her height, she kind of gave up performance to come back to Smoketown to open both a daycare and a nursing home. So she, you know, was in Smoketown tending to both the elderly and the very young, instead of continuing to pursue this career.
Well, churches and community centers, first of all. If you think about where those people come from, they're singing at church. They were active in their community centers and sometimes became performers. So, like I said in the beginning of the interview, I grew up in Murray, and Murray is close to Paducah, which is another river town. There's a huge collection of jug music that comes out of Paducah. There's a collection there. Undoubtedly, some of those songs came up here. You know, the songs would have been heard so in your clubs, in I guess your juke joints, but also those people. The people are actually how those things get moved around. If they're not records, if Black people aren't having published works and they're not getting credit, then it's the individual musicians that are traveling, and of course people hearing those rehearsals and imitating their style.
Well, I think you touched on something so important about jug music is it's so communal in nature, right? Like if you have a jug, if you have a washboard, if you have spoons or a shaker, like if you know the rhythm, like you're then invited in. If it's at like a church picnic, if it's at a revival, if it's something where music is being played socially, if you know the steps, you're invited in. And I think that's so important about the way like improvisational musics function.
You know, at its bare bones, it was an innovation of not having access to musical instruments, right? You don't have these musical instruments, so you grab available things. This is where we get the spoons. This is where we get the kind of jawbone, which were oftentimes put together with jug bands, right? These are people who don't have access to the tools of creativity saying, no, like my creativity will still shine. I'm going to use whatever. And then to use the jugs and to make that creativity kind of flower out through this collection of jugs, right? Which just in their bare nature are percussive. So you have all these little kind of brass sounding sometimes, but mostly percussive, just boop, 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 boop. And, you know, there are some early videos of like very early black and white grainy videos of some Louisville-based jug bands. And if you look at it, it's an absolute prototype for what became hip hop. You look at the vocalist and is doing kind of not singing, but rhythmically timed, almost storytelling, speech over top of this rhythmic backbone, right? That's kind of syncopated and going everywhere. You see so much about where American popular music is today reflected in that.
When you described it like that, I'm like, oh, it sounds like church. It sounds like a sermon.
Right, absolutely. And it's this idea that is always kind of maintained throughout all forms of kind of Afro-diasporic music of storytelling with a rhythm. It's this dependence, right, on when we're listening to story in the presence of a rhythm, our mind changes. We lock into that story more. We focus a little bit. Hence why, right, everybody's listening to lo-fi beats while they study these days. But we know that this science, right, has been attested to just in popular music culture making, and especially Black music culture making, right, in this hemisphere. For the past 400 years, that has led absolutely to almost every form of American popular music that we know. It's some type of rhythm with storytelling, whether that be vocal or other sonics and instrumentation. But so jug band is kind of pure rhythm, made with the tools kind of at hand. And so it's a really beautiful and unique American kind of outgrowth.
Just, to touch on Sara Martin and work we've done with her through the Unknown Project, we were able to again bring in some of her work and contemporize it. We remade Sweet Lovin' Old Soul and Tain't Nobody's Business, and then had two different singers over iterations sing those pieces in the ballroom. And that felt, just like necessary and important work of like archive of bringing her home to Louisville in a different way.
And those are, in addition, I've got an even older track. I guess I made that one in maybe 2017. That was the first time I started kind of learning about Sara's life and music. And did a house music remix. So like a club kind of forward remix of Sweet Lovin' Old Soul. But what a great thing, right? To be able to be in a club situation with folks dancing, dark room, kind of lasers everywhere, very futuristic in setting, but then to realize that they're dancing to, sounds that were first put down to record in 1923 by this person who lived, just right around the block from me. The Unknown Project was a project from Ideas X Lab here in Louisville, working together with a playwright and director and just general great creative, Sydney Monroe Williams. But it was a theatrical production that took place on the Belle of Louisville that was part of this wider suite of programming that was part of the Unknown Project that was really trying to get people to explore those untold kind of narratives and stories of freedom seekers, of enslaved individuals, especially right here on the banks of the Ohio River, because the Ohio River was that kind of dividing land. Kind of Dixie was all south, right? It was that geographic marker that people associated with freedom, whether or not that was true or not, right? Many people didn't find that freedom when they got over to Indiana, or at least not in the way they hoped. But we have this huge cultural place of the Ohio River in that part of American history. It was often referred to as the River Jordan, right? And kind of invested with all of that spiritual freedom that people were drawing from religious texts.
Yeah, it's like a multi-sensory, like visceral experience of the past, even though this boat is contemporary and we're doing things in the present. Stories of people, leaving the banks of Kentucky and trying to make this journey to freedom to Indiana on the other side. And not only were we like locating that in the past as the ship moved and as these characters disembarked at the end, we brought everyone to the present. And for us, it was an opportunity to bring Sara Martin's music back onto these boats in a real way and contemporize them. And it felt so meaningful and so important. And I'm going to get emotional, so I'm going to stop talking. But to be in that legacy, like I feel that weight. And it's very, very emotional and very important to me that we honor these things, right?
Yeah, the venue itself, the space of the boats themselves, it gives you the opportunity to again play with time travel, right? To go in and bring these sounds from the past, or from these what seem to be sometimes disparate genres of like electronic music and folk music, but to bring those together and to perform those in a space like the Bell, it gives audience members another anchor and touch point for that music. It locates that music in a space, in a surrounding, and I think that helps people kind of experience it in a better way and understand it in a better way.
Another project that the Unknown Project did was Broken Wings Still Fly. I was able to help with some sound stuff on 2 of those productions. And they took journals that were former enslaved people's journals, mostly women, and these are Kentuckians, so pulled aspects of their narratives and brought them to one stage and made a storyline where they could all interact together. Brandi created her own playlist that would play before the play and at intermission. And it was such a transformative experience to hear both how their narratives, the play, actual words of the play that were taken from slave narratives, were still so like this sounds like something that a story that one of my friends would tell today, and then alongside the playlist that she chose, which were mostly modern songs, but they fit right in with what was going on. How unfortunate and beautiful for us to see that we are still literally living these narratives today, but we didn't know that. And yeah, shout out to the Unknown Project.
Yeah, and shout out to Brandi LaShay, who wrote Broken Wings. I was like, let me remember Miss Brandi's last name, Brandi LaShay.
Yeah, there's still such a reckoning and healing that we are actively dealing with as people that are alive in 2025. And to what you said, I think a lot of people all over the country come to historic venues to do what they can, either pay homage, to educate themselves, people that are funding and donating to these venues, and actors. Everybody is involved in the work that they can do. I am self-employed as a music therapist, so my company is working with littles, doing developmental stuff. We're going to see Spectrum folks, so helping that story. But I will say that I have a new group. It's a quintet of horn players. We're playing chamber music, which sounds like classical music. Like I touched on earlier, classical music kind of wants for recognition of his Black artists as well. So it's been kind of a gift to land back with these people that I've known the whole time. We just, time and schedules, I think, are just now being able to sit down and acknowledge oh yeah, we all have this background that we could be using to do this work within the Black classical legacy. So look forward to sharing that on this boat as well.
Yeah, if there's any funders out there, more funding for music, music, arts, and culture creators. Because as you see, right, musicians are never just musicians. We're cultural workers in a big way. So yeah, we need support, right, for whatever those next projects are, because they're not just for us; they're for everybody. But yeah, we're looking forward to continuing our work at Rhythm Science Sound. We've got a lot of kind of good developments coming in terms of our space in Smoketown, just making it a better place for learning about music, making music, playing, experimenting, creating, for everybody from littles all the way up to elders, and just finding ways that we can kind of help tell the Bell story through sound and music in more fun and kind of cool ways.
Yeah, all the same things they said. I will say, if people are looking for ways to connect with Rhythm Science Sound, we do offer things called Lo-Fi Book Club at our space in Smoketown, where we invite people to come in and share a few to know words and listen to lo-fi and craft near other people, but not have to interact with other people. We're big on parallel play. So those are happening every month, a couple times a month. And then we do, a radio show twice a month on the internet if people are looking for what we might sound like in a different context other than these boats.